dry sweat. The blare of music inside the fairground drew him to stand in the entrance. So far today the only young men he'd seen had been in uniform, but here were men as young as himself in civilian dress, munitions workers. One of them was chatting to a young girl with bright yellow skin. He felt the automatic flow of bile begin and turned away, forcing himself to contemplate the bald grass. A child, holding a stick of candy floss, turned to watch him, attracted to the man who stood so still among all the swirl and dazzle. He caught her looking at him and smiled, remembering the soft cotton-wool sweetness of candy floss that turned to clag on the roof of your mouth. She bridled and turned away, clutching her mother's skirt. Very wise. As he walked on, his smile faded. He could have been a munitions worker, he thought, kept out of danger, lined his pockets. His father would have wangled him a place in a nice, safe, reserved occupation, and would not have despised him for it either, unlike many fathers. The weedy little runt would at least have been behaving like a sensible weedy little runt, refusing to fight in the boss's war, but he'd never seriously considered doing that. Why not? He wondered now. Because I don't want to be one of them, he thought, remembering a munitions worker's hand patting a girl's bottom as he helped her into the swing boat. Not duty, not patriotism, not fear of what other people would think, certainly not that. No, a kind of fastidiousness. Once, as a small boy, he'd slipped chewed-up pieces of fatty mutton into the pocket of his trousers because he couldn't bring himself to swallow them, and his father, when the crime came to light, had said, in tones of ringing disgust, "That bairn's too fussy to live." Too fussy to live, Prior thought. There you are. Nowhere near France and an epitaph already. The thought cheered him up enormously. By now he was walking up the hill towards the barracks, a chest-tightening climb, but he was managing it well. His asthma was good at the moment, better than it had been for months. All the same, it might be as well to sit quietly somewhere for a few minutes before he went into the examination room. In the end, all he could do was to turn up in a reasonable state and answer the questions honestly, or at least tell no lies that were likely to be found out. The decision would be taken by other people, it always was, though he had managed to take one decision himself. His thoughts shifted to Charles Manning and the last evening they'd spent together in London. "Have you stopped to think what's going to happen if you're not sent back?" Manning had asked. 6 months, at least 6 months, probably to the end of the war, making sure new recruits wash between their toes. Might have its moments. Doing 101 completely routine jobs, each of which could be done equally well by somebody else. You'd be much better working at the ministry. I can't promise to keep the job open. No, thank you, Charles. No, thank you. He was passing the Clarence Gardens Hotel where he'd been stationed briefly last winter before the summons to London came. Plenty of routine jobs there. He and Owen, his fellow nutcase, had arrived on the same day, neither of them welcomed by the CO. They'd been assigned to light duties. Prior became an administrative dog's body, sorting out the battalion's chaotic filing system. Owen fared yet worse, chivying the char ladies, ordering vegetables, peering into lavatory bowls in search of unmilitary stains. Mitchell had given them hell. Prior got him in the mornings when he was totally vile, Owen in the evenings when brandy had mellowed him slightly. "What do you expect?" Prior said, when Owen complained. "He's lost 2 sons. And who shows up instead of them? A couple of twitching Nancy boys from a loony bin in Scotland." Silence from Owen. "That's what he thinks, you know." As he reached the entrance to the barracks, a squad of men in singlets and shorts returning from a cross-country run overtook him, and he stood back to let them pass, bare thighs streaked with mud, steam rising from sweaty chests, glazed eyes, slack mouths, and as they pounded and panted past, he recognized Owen at the head of the column, turning to wave. "Good heavens," Mather said as Prior pulled off his shirt. "You haven't been getting much outdoor exercise, have you?" "I've been working at the Ministry of Munitions." Mather was middle-aged, furrow-cheeked, sandy-haired, shrewd. "All right, drop your drawers, bend over." They always went for the arse, Prior thought, doing as he was told. An army marches on its stomach and hobbles on its hemorrhoids. He felt gloved fingers on his buttocks, separating them, and thought, better men than you have paid for this. "I see you've got asthma." "There?" "Yes, sir." "Turn round." Another unduly intimate gesture. "Cough." Prior cleared his throat. "I said cough." The fingers jabbed. "And again." The hand changed sides. "Again." Prior was aware of wheezing as he caught his breath. "How long?" Prior looked blank, then stammered. 6 months, sir." 6 months, but it says... the doctor told my mother I had it when I was 6 months old, sir. Ah, Mather turned over a page of the file. That makes more sense. Apparently I couldn't tolerate milk. Mather looked up. Awkward little bugger, weren't you? Well, we better have a listen. He reached for his stethoscope and came towards Pryor. What were you doing at the Ministry of Munitions? Intelligence, sir. Oh, very impressive. Catch anybody? Pryor looked bleakly ahead of him. Yes. Patrol here caught a German spy on the cliffs. Mather snorted, fitting the stethoscope. Tickled a local yokel with their bayonets, more like. Pryor started to say something, but Mather was listening to his chest. After a few minutes, he straightened up. Yes, you have got a bit of a wheeze. His attention was caught by the scar on Pryor's elbow. He turned the arm towards him. The Somme, Pryor said. Must have hurt. The expression funny bone didn't seem appropriate at the time. Mather went back to the desk, sat down. Now let's see if I've got this straight. You were invalided home with shell shock, that right? April last year? Yes, sir. And you were sent first to Netley and then to Craig Lockhart War Hospital, where you remained till November. He looked up. I suppose you get a lot of dipsomania in places like that? Alcohol, man, he explained, as Pryor continued to look blank. Didn't see any, sir. If I had, I'd certainly have drunk it. So what were your symptoms? I was mute, sir. Some people found it an improvement on the basic model. But Mather was reading, not listening. W.H.R. Rivers, he said. I knew him. He was 2 years ahead of me at Bart's. Paralytic stammer. Pryor looked puzzled. No. Ah, got his own voice back too. He must be good. He tapped a sheet of paper. The discharge report says asthma. I had 2 attacks while I was there. Mather smiled. Any problems with the nerves now? No. Appetite? I could eat more than I get. So could we all, laddie. Sleeping all right? Not last night. Bloody tent leaks. Generally? I sleep all right. Mather sat back in his chair. How did you get in? Through the flap. Mather's forefinger shot up. Watch it, laddie. How did you get into the army? A brief struggle with temptation, ending as Pryor's struggles with temptation usually did. I lied to the doctor. Surprisingly, Mather laughed. A short bark. Everybody lied, Pryor said. So they did. I remember it well. I saw men who'd climbed out of the window of the workhouse infirmary to come and enlist. Syphilis, epilepsy, tuberculosis, rickets. One lad, little squeaky voice, not a hair on his chin, 14 if that, looked me straight in the eye and swore on his mother's life he was 19. Mather smiled, revealing brown teeth. Not one of them got past me. Oh, fuck. Gas training? Mather said. Silence. Well? Terribly good idea, Pryor said earnestly. Did you go through the huts? No. You must be affected at very low concentrations. I was known as the battalion canary, sir. Partly that, partly my pleasant, cheerful personality. Mather looked at him. Get dressed. The point is, I managed perfectly well for 3 years. I didn't once report sick with asthma or the effects of gas. Yes, laddie. Mather looked unexpectedly compassionate. And it might be said you've done your bit. A twitch of the pale, proud face. Not by me. And the asthma never played you up in France? Never. 2 attacks in Craig Lockhart, none in France. I wonder why. Open-air life suited my chest, sir. We're not running a sanatorium, laddie. Go on, get dressed. Then you go left along the corridor, turn left at the end, and you'll see a row of chairs. Wait there. Mather went into the adjoining room and started on his next victim. Pryor dressed, pausing to wipe the sweat off his upper lip. Like going over the top, he thought. No, it wasn't. Nothing was like that. Civilians seemed to use that expression all the time now. I went a bit over the top last night, they said, meaning they'd had a second glass of port. Pryor peered into the small looking-glass behind the wash-basin, checking the knot in his tie. If they didn't send him back, he was going to be awfully lonely, marooned among civilians with their glib talk. His reflection jeered. Lonely? You? Oh, come on, ducky. You can always split in 2. At least the board didn't know about that. Or rather, they didn't, provided Rivers hadn't written to them. A paralytic stammer. Not just any old stammer. Paralytic. Interesting, Pryor thought, letting himself out of the room. The place smelled like a barracks. Well, it was a barracks,